the start of an unexpected friendship. When all of this began, I was just shy of my 23rd birthday. I want to make it clear that I wasn't who I am now. Back then, I was a completely different person, hard-headed, naive, and easily swept up in things that seem harmless. Over time, though, I've learned the hard way. It was when I was 22 that I met a man online. Let's call him Guy. He was 40, much older than I was, and when we first started talking, I had no clue how different someone his age could be. At first, I thought he was just another random person, but he quickly became someone I look forward to chatting with. He was a good listener, a real storyteller, always sharing bizarre, random tales. His way of talking was strange, almost like we were in a real-life Dungeons and Dragons game. Sometimes I didn't know if he was joking or being serious. Despite how odd he could be, I didn't think much of it. We quickly grew close. We messaged each other every day. I was in a relationship at the time, and even though he was technically just a friend, Guy got along with my boyfriend too. It was weird at first, but there was nothing sinister about it, or so I thought. Then, out of the blue, we stopped talking for a while. No texts, no messages, nothing. It was quiet for months. I figured maybe life got in the way. But then one day, I got a message from him. He said he'd lost all his contacts, except mine. I didn't think much of it at first, but then he sent me a picture of my contact details from his phone. It was a photo I'd sent a month ago, and something about that felt off. Still, I didn't think it was a big deal. Our friendship picked up right where it had left off. He told me he was going through a divorce, and I listened. He said I was the only person he could talk to, and then came the first red flag. He started asking for my help in spying on his soon-to-be ex-wife. He wanted me to find out who she was living with. The situation felt strange, but I still didn't see the danger. After all, we were just friends, right? That was when a friend of mine warned me. They said something wasn't right about him, said I should stop talking to him, but I ignored them. Why? Because I believed that Guy was different, that he wasn't someone who would cross boundaries. But then, the boundaries started to blur. Part 2, boundaries and red flags. As we kept talking, things began to take a strange turn. Guy's behavior became more controlling, more demanding. He started to hint that he wanted me to do things for him that went beyond simple friendship. The messages became longer, more intense, and the boundaries between us blurred further. It was after that when he brought up Scientology. Now, I didn't know much about it, but Guy was all about it. He'd talk about his audits, his meetings, and the moral support he needed from me. I never agreed to go with him, but he insisted. I was starting to feel uncomfortable, but I convinced myself that it was just his way of coping with his divorce. My friends, yes, the ones who had warned me before, told me I needed to be careful. They said he was too obsessive, too strange. They could see what I was too blind to admit. That this guy, who had once seemed harmless, was crossing some serious lines. But, as always, I ignored them. I told myself he was just lonely. After all, we were just friends, right? Right? Soon, Guy wanted to meet in person. I tried to decline politely. I made up excuses, things like being too busy or just needing some time for myself. But he was persistent. It was like he wouldn't let it go. Eventually, I caved. I gave him my address. I remember the day he showed up. He arrived on a scooter, looking nothing like I expected. I'm a tall woman, 5'7", and Guy, now 42, was a whole foot shorter than me. He was awkward, like he didn't quite know how to handle himself in person, especially with someone like me. And then, without warning, he kissed me. It was forceful, unexpected, and completely unwelcome. I pulled back as fast as I could, trying to push him away. He looked at me with an odd expression and said, "I just want to make sure you were real." It was as if my standing in front of him wasn't enough proof. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't what I had agreed to, but because I was at my parents' house, I felt somewhat protected. At least I had that much security. When my little sister came outside, Guy immediately latched onto her. She was 17 at the time, and he somehow convinced her to ride around the neighborhood with him. I didn't like it, but I didn't want to cause a scene. She was old enough to make her own decisions, right? She came back, and that was when I realized that I had to make him leave. I asked him to go, but that wasn't the end of it. Part 3. The control escalates. After that, Guy's messages became more frequent, more controlling. He began asking for my younger sister's phone number. He started discussing plans about what we could all do together. I wanted to cut contact, but something held me back. I had given him my address. He knew where I lived. He knew where my sister lived. The thought of him showing up at my door again, unannounced, terrified me. Finally, after days of constant texting, texts that I barely replied to, he began to push harder. He started messaging my boyfriend, asking about my whereabouts, demanding that I give him my sister's number. He even claimed that I had agreed to it, which was a complete lie. At this point, I blocked him. I was done, but blocking him wasn't the end. No, he didn't stop. Guy continued to send me messages, bombarding me with dozens of texts every day. He'd even messaged my boyfriend, asking if he knew where I was. It felt like I couldn't escape him, even though I had tried to cut all ties. I was terrified. My hands shook when I checked my phone, and my stomach would churn at the thought of him reaching out again. The most chilling part? He didn't stop. Even when I blocked him, he found a way to keep sending messages. And then one day it stopped. He vanished. No more texts. No more calls. Just silence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Was he watching? Was he waiting? Was he going to show up again? Part 4, the final act. Time passed, and I tried to move on. But even at 28, I still remember the feeling in my gut. The feeling of being watched. Even though I hadn't heard from him in years, I still kept looking over my shoulder. You don't forget a situation like that. I learned a lot from that experience. Red flags aren't just warnings. They're signs that shouldn't be ignored. When your instincts tell you to stay away, you should listen. And the biggest lesson of all? Sometimes people you trust or think you trust can hide the darkest secrets. I learned that the hard way. Epilogue, the aftermath. Looking back, I still can't believe I ignored those early warnings. How many times was I told to stay away? How many times did my friends warn me? It's hard to admit, but I kept going back. But in the end, I'm grateful for one thing. I learned how to trust myself. Now, when something doesn't feel right, I listen. I don't care how much someone convinces me otherwise. I've learned to trust my gut. The whole thing could have been so much worse. I was lucky. Many aren't. Part 5, the unseen aftermath. The silence that followed was deafening. For months, there were no more messages, no phone calls. I almost allowed myself to believe that it was truly over. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart would skip a beat. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was a fear that it could be him reaching out again. That kind of fear becomes a constant companion, lingering in the back of your mind, making you second-guess every little thing. At 28, I thought I had moved on. Life had continued, as it does for everyone, and I began to tell myself that this was in the past. But the truth was that I had carried the weight of that experience with me, even if I tried to bury it. It wasn't something I could easily forget, nor should I have. The scars of fear and betrayal had imprinted themselves on my psyche in ways I couldn't predict it. I started noticing small shifts in myself, how I reacted to things that seemed normal before. When a man walked too close behind me in public, my breath would catch. When a friend mentioned meeting someone online, a cold shiver would creep down my spine. I started locking my doors earlier in the evening, double-checking that the windows were secure, even if it was just me home alone. It wasn't until I tried to start dating again that the full weight of my past actions hit me. I signed up for a dating app, tentatively, of course, and under a fake name. I was too scared to use my real identity again, as though doing so would expose me to the same danger I had faced before. My profile was a mix of generic facts, with no personal details, nothing about my family, knowing where I lived, or what I truly wanted. It was just a way to dip my toes into the waters of normalcy again. When I matched with someone, a seemingly kind man named Sam, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could start over. But deep down, I knew I wasn't fully ready. Still, I decided to give it a shot. Our first meeting went well. He was kind, and we spent the evening talking about our lives, our dreams, our fears. It felt easy, in the way that early connections sometimes do. But even in those moments, I was still looking over my shoulder. I never let my guard down fully. Every time he laughed, I found myself analyzing his tone. Every time he smiled, I wondered if it was real. I kept thinking back to Guy and how easily I had let him into my life, how I had been fooled into thinking I could trust someone without really knowing them. A few weeks went by, and Sam and I continued talking. We met up a few more times, and each time I felt that internal tension. I knew I was projecting my past trauma onto him. He had never done anything to hurt me, but I couldn't help the flashbacks, the fear that he might turn out to be something worse. One evening, while we were walking back to my car after a date, I spotted a familiar face across the street. It took a moment for my brain to process, but then it hit me. It was him, Guy. I froze. My chest tightened as I watched him stand outside a bar, leaning against a lamppost, his eyes scanning the crowd. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I grabbed Sam's hand, urging him to walk faster, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't notice me. But I knew deep down that if Guy saw me, he'd find a way to get to me again. My heart was pounding in my chest as we crossed the street, trying to avoid eye contact. When we reached my car, Sam noticed my distress. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked gently. But I couldn't bring myself to answer him right away. Instead, I mumbled something about feeling off, about not wanting to be around so many people. Sam looked at me with concern, but I could see he didn't fully understand. How could he? I had never told him about Guy, about the months of harassment, the fear of being watched. Part 6, Confronting the Past. I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm my racing thoughts. What if it wasn't just a coincidence? What if Guy was back in town looking for me? The fear was overwhelming. I had never allowed myself to feel this vulnerable again. Yet there I was, paralyzed by the idea that someone from my past could still haunt me. The past had always been a shadow, but now it felt like it was coming back to chase me. The next day, I did something I've been avoiding for years. I went to the police. I told them everything about Guy, how he had stalked me, how he had harassed me for months after I cut ties with him. I hadn't wanted to make a big deal out of it before, but now I realized I needed to take control. I couldn't keep living in fear of him coming back. The officer I spoke with was understanding, but there was a part of me that still wasn't sure if they'd take me seriously. "Do you think he's in town?" the officer asked, taking notes on a pad. "I don't know," I said quietly, "but I saw him. I know it was him." They promised to look into it, but I wasn't sure how much could be done. After all, he hadn't done anything illegal yet. Not by the law's standards, anyway. I just wanted to make sure that if he came back, I had done everything I could to protect myself. Part 7, The Fear That Never Fully Leaves. A week later, I saw Guy again. This time, it wasn't in the street or in some random encounter. It was on my doorstep. I had just come back from the store, the bags heavy in my hands. When I saw him standing there, like a ghost from the past, I froze, my heart racing as I realized what had just happened. He looked exactly the same, though older, with a more desperate expression on his face. His eyes scanned me up and down, as though he were measuring me, deciding whether to say something or just disappear. I didn't know what to do. I could feel my whole body go cold. I wanted to scream, to run, but instead, I stood there, frozen, paralyzed by the flood of memories that came rushing back. "Hey," he said casually as though nothing had happened. "It's been a while." I stared at him, too shocked to respond. "I just want to see how you were doing," he continued. "You're hard to forget, you know." I barely remember how to speak. I had prepared myself for this moment. Sure, but the reality of it was different. It was raw. It was terrifying. "Get away from my door." I finally managed to say, my voice shaky but firm, "I don't want to see you again." He smiled then, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I just wanted to talk," he said, like he hadn't been a part of my nightmare for the last few years. I slammed the door in his face. I didn't care what happened. I was done. This time, I wouldn't let him get to me. I would make sure I wasn't going to be his victim anymore. Part 8, Healing and Moving Forward. The next few months were a blur. I moved apartments, changed my number, and began therapy to help deal with the emotional aftermath. I was determined to never let fear rule my life again, but I couldn't forget what I had been through. I realized something important. The fear would always be a part of me, but that didn't mean it had to control me. I had the power to live my life freely, without being held hostage by my past. I slowly started dating again, this time with full transparency. I told Sam everything about my past with Guy, and he was incredibly understanding. He didn't judge me for it. Instead, he helped me rebuild the trust one had lost in myself. The road to recovery wasn't easy. The paranoia never fully left. There were days when, in the end, I realized that the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about trust.